For the last decade or so, if you were following Bangladeshi politics, things were, well, pretty predictable. But that's all just been thrown out the window. A recent election has completely rewritten the script. And what's happened could have massive ripple effects, not just for the 170 million people there, but for the entire geopolitical balance of South Asia. Seriously.
So, to really get a grip on just how huge this is, we got to start with one number, 20.
Yep, 20 years. That's how long one of the country's two main political parties, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, has basically been on the sidelines. They've been completely out of power since their last term ended way back in 2006. Stuck in the political wilderness, you could say.
Because on February 12th, that entire reality just shattered.
All right, Section 1, a landslide in Bangladesh. So let's really get into it. After years of political chaos, right, which saw the longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina get pushed out, Bangladesh just held its first national election. And the result? Whoa, it was a political earthquake. No other way to put it.
So we're talking about a massive 2/3 majority. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or BNP for short, didn't just scrape by with a win. No, they stormed back into power. This is about as clear a mandate as you can get from the voters. And just look at these numbers. They really tell the story. Out of the 299 seats that were up for grabs, the BNP took a whopping 212. They only needed 151 to form a government. So yeah, this wasn't just a win, it was a total rout. And hey, just for a little bit of context here, the parliament in Bangladesh is called the Jatiya Sangsad. It has 350 seats in total, but this election was all about those 300 main seats that are directly elected by the people. Now, here's what makes this so important. For the past decade, elections there were, frankly, pretty one-sided. The BNP often just boycotted them, saying the whole process under Sheikh Hasina was unfair. But this time was different. Hasina's party, the Awami League, was banned from even participating. So all these other parties and alliances jumped in, making it a genuinely competitive race for the first time in ages. Okay, Section 2, we're talking about resetting the nation's democracy. So who's the person right at the center of this massive shakeup? Well, this historic win was led by a pretty historic figure himself, a man who has literally returned from his own political wilderness.
So who is the Dark Prince? The man we're talking about is Tariq Rahman. He's the son of a former prime minister, Khalida Zia, who also founded the BNP. But for years, he's had this kind of mysterious nickname, the Dark Prince. Why? Well, mostly because he was seen as pulling the strings of his party from a distance, while in exile.
And man, his journey back to the top has been pretty wild. Think about this. He was arrested on corruption charges back in 2008 and then spent the next 17 years in exile in London. He only just came back to Bangladesh in December of 2025. Then his mother passed away in January, he officially took over the party, and bam. Just a few weeks later, he leads them to this landslide victory. It's an incredible story. You can really feel the mood in the country. The head of the interim government that oversaw the whole election, the Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus, he put it perfectly. He called it the birth of a new Bangladesh. There's this real, tangible feeling that this is a fresh start for democracy there. So the big hope now is that this huge mandate can actually lead to some real change. I mean, just having competitive politics again is a massive step. But the real tests are going to be economic, right? Tackling crazy high inflation and youth unemployment. The thinking is a stable majority government might finally be what's needed to bring back investor confidence and get the economy back on track. All right, Section 3. This is where it gets really interesting for the neighbors, because this election is not just a local story, not at all. The biggest shockwaves are being felt right next door, in India. They're now looking at a totally new and, frankly, a much more unpredictable situation on their eastern border. And to get why this matters so much to India, you just have to look at a map. They share a massive land border, over 4,000 kilometers long. They share rivers, trade, deep security connections. So what happens in Dhaka definitely does not stay in Dhaka. And this is where things get really, really interesting. You can see this stark contrast on the screen. See, under Sheikh Hasina, India had a partner they could count on. It was comfortable, it was predictable. They signed historic deals, like a big land boundary agreement, and Hasina's government really cracked down on anti-India militant groups. But the BNP? Historically, they've been much more assertive, more nationalist. They've often accused India of meddling. So the big worry in New Delhi is, what now?
Will security cooperation fall apart? Could more radical groups find room to breathe? Okay, let's zoom out a bit for Section 4. The geopolitical game changes, because this brings us to the much bigger picture. This isn't just about India and Bangladesh anymore. A new government in Dhaka has the potential to shift the entire strategic chessboard in the Bay of Bengal.
And guess who's watching this closer than anyone? Beijing. See, historically, the BNP has always been a lot cozier with China than Sheikh Hasina's government ever was.
So get this, Bangladesh is already part of China's huge Belt and Road Initiative. If Tariq Rahman's new government decides to tilt even more towards Beijing, that could give China a major strategic foothold right in India's backyard. And that's a direct challenge to India's maritime security. It would force them to completely rethink their naval strategy in the whole region. Now, for its part, India is being very careful. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was actually one of the first world leaders to call and congratulate Rahman, and his message was very deliberate. He said India supports a democratic, progressive, and inclusive Bangladesh. It's basically a message of cautious engagement, saying, hey, things might have changed, but our door is still open. Which brings us to our final section, a nation at a crossroads. Because after all this political whirlwind, Bangladesh is at a really critical moment. It's facing two very, very different paths forward. So here's the bottom line. It all comes down to one choice. You have the path of progress, focusing on the economy, building up democracy, and trying to balance relationships with other countries. And then you have the path of extremism, letting radical forces gain ground, taking a hardline nationalist stance, and creating instability for the whole region. The crucial question is, which path will Tariq Rahman choose? So the election gave us a very clear answer about who will govern Bangladesh. But the much, much bigger question is still out there. Will this be a new dawn for the country, a more prosperous and democratic future? Or will it become the next big flashpoint for all of Asia? The world is definitely watching to see what happens next.